In this example, we're going to see how to use a combination of multiple inheritance and abstract base classes to implement a type of programming feature called an interface. Now, some languages like C# and Java provide this feature as a built-in part of the language, but Python doesn't have explicit language support for this. You can think of an interface as a kind of promise. By implementing an interface, a particular class makes a promise, or a contract, as it's often called in software engineering, to provide a certain kind of behavior or capability. So let's go ahead and open up the interface_start file, and we'll see how this works. All right. So you can see that this is now a simplified version of the abstract base class example that we used earlier with the shapes. So suppose we wanted our concrete shape objects to be able to represent themselves as JSON. Now we could just make that a part of the graphic shape base class, but if we had a variety of other objects in our program that we also wanted to have that function, then we would need to add that to each of those base classes as well, and that's just a lot of needless duplication. So what we can do instead is create another abstract base class, and we'll call it JSONify. So let's go ahead and create that. And I'll have it inherit from the abstract base class. And then we will have this class define a single abstract method called toJSON. So we'll define toJSON and put an empty implementation in that class. So now notice this method does not provide any implementation itself. It just defines the name of the method. So we can then add this new class to the definition of the circle class, right? Not the base class, not the graphic shape. We're going to put it on the circle. So remember, this has the effect of requiring that the circle class has to override and implement the toJSON abstract method. Otherwise, it's an error. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And you'll see, sure enough, we get the error because we haven't implemented the toJSON method. So let's go back and add that to the class. And I'll put that below the calc area. I'll name it toJSON. And I'm just going to return a formatted string. And we'll put in some JSON here. And then we'll close that off. All right. And then I will call that function down here in the exercise code. So I'll write print c.toJSON. Okay. So what I've essentially done is created a method that I have to override, right, called toJSON, and I've mixed that in on my subclass by having two base classes here. And then I override that method to provide a string that's just a JSON representation of my object. So it's going to have, actually, it shouldn't be square, it should be circle. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so go ahead and run this. All right, and there you can see in the output, we have the results of the calc area function, and then we have the results of the JSON right here. So what we've essentially done is created a very small focused class right here called JSONify that we can now use whenever we want another class to be able to indicate that it knows how to represent itself in JSON. We didn't have to modify the graphic shape base class in order to do this, which gives us the flexibility to apply this new class, which is serving the function of an interface, anywhere it's needed. So interfaces are really useful for declaring that a class has a capability that it knows how to provide. And even though Python doesn't have explicit language support for it, it's flexible enough to be able to implement it with abstract base classes and multiple inheritance.